On today's show, the first part of a two-part MLK Day extravaganza on Locked On Hawks podcast. We'll be touching on what became a very nice win for the Hawks at home over the Miami Heat. A fantastic first half, not quite as good after the halftime break, but still quite enough to get the Hawks back to 500 on the season. We'll have all that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1390 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening here on MLK Day. And today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users got 100% is a deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That is PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. I also want to encourage you, as always, to make this podcast, Locked On Hawks, your first listen each and every day. Check us out across podcast platforms, whether it be Apple or Spotify or Google Play or elsewhere on the audio side. And then we're also over on YouTube if you want to watch the video product. And today's show is going to be basically a two-part episode. You're watching part one. This is episode 1390. And it's going to focus largely on what became a very nice win for the Hawks against the Miami Heat on this Monday. But there's also a part two. So going over that at the end of this podcast should be in your feeds right now, covering the awesome win for the Hawks on Saturday up in Toronto, sweep by back-to-back. Also, some organizational stuff being reported and talked about at the highest levels, the front office, the new structure with Kyle Korver being ascendant to the assistant GM position. Also a transaction in the last couple of days with Jarrett Culver. So basically a lot of content on this Monday evening and put it into two parts as a result of that. But diving in now to the game itself on Monday. And honestly, the big headliner is that the Hawks have now won 3 in a row. This is only the second time all year long. The Hawks have won 3 games in a row, first time since November, and they're back to 500 now for the first time in about 3 weeks. That's not a huge milestone for a team that had high expectations this year, but still it's sort of an encouragement as this team is playing much better basketball in recent days. As far as this game is concerned, the Heat, are not like the best team in the league necessarily. I've been a little bit low on the Heat at times, but it's worth noting that coming into the day that Miami was playing very well. They had won 12 of the last 17 games. They had a fantastic defense in recent days as well. And the Hawks were not playing a team that was to be taken lightly, even in their own building. They also the Heat won in Atlanta earlier this year. Beyond the actual result of the game, though, the headliners, probably the Hawks, were at full strength in this game for the first time in a long time, and really the first time the entire season for an entire game. Clint Capela came back. He had missed 13 of the last 14 games and 10 games in a row. Trae Young was also playing after being listed as probable. Bogdanovich came back after missing Saturday's game in Toronto. And again, second time all year, the Hawks actually had their entire roster available. And if you remember this earlier in the season, that happened once before, but then there were 2 injuries by the end of the game. DeAndre Hunter went down, etc. So this is the first time that the Hawks started and finished a game with their entire roster intact. That's a very nice sign for the future. Miami wasn't healthy necessarily either. They were missing Kyle Lowry and Duncan Robinson, a few other guys. So not like a full-strength opponent, but still, Miami did have their big guns. They had Jimmy Butler. They had Bam Adebayo. They had Tyler Hero. So, they weren't again, full strength, but close to it. And BetOnline, our friends over there, made the Hawks actually small favorites at tip-off. They were underdogs overnight. And then with Capela coming back, etc., the Hawks were narrow 1-point favorites at tip-off. So basically a coin flip in a lot of ways, and the Hawks did basically wire to wire in this game. They started Okongwu in this one, which was not necessarily indicative. I got a question about whether that was something that was going to happen moving forward. I would be very, very, very surprised if the Hawks stopped starting Capela. But basically, after he missed about a month, I expect him to be restricted. He closed the game. He played 21 minutes off the bench, and if that's a restriction level, you can't really start that guy. It makes life harder on you if you're trying to start someone that has that heavy of a restriction. So no surprise to me that he wasn't starting in this game, but notable nonetheless. The Hawks did start the game out well, 9-4. Trae got fouled on a 3, made all 3 of those. I think the Hawks did a good job early on of moving the ball, in particular getting advantages with Collins necessarily. They created 3 or 4 really good looks out of his post-ups against smaller players. They did have some defensive issues. Jimmy Butler had a couple of easy buckets at the rim, but the offense was honestly fantastic for the entirety of the first half. They actually opened the game 8-11 from the field and 9 of 9 at the line in the first 7 minutes. 9 free throw attempts in 7 minutes for the Hawks. It's not a normal pace. Trae had an awesome start. He did cool off a little bit, as we'll get into, with 10 turnovers in this one, but he was really good early on. Actually made his first 2 threes, got to the line 4 times, etc. Rotationally, it was Capela coming in mid-quarter. No surprise there. They sort of immediately had that kind of juice on defense. He had a nice layup when he first came into the game as well. It was Bogdanovich and Aaron Holiday alongside Capela. They did have the Trae Young very short rest in the first and third quarters, as is customary. And Aaron Holiday, just for the record, as we'll get into this later on, played 4 minutes in the first half. And basically, the Hawks played about an 8-man rotation for the rest of the game. It was 8.5. You know, Holiday kind of a half deployment, but basically, the Hawks had 8 guys play 20 minutes or more, and it's kind of their core 8. I know Jalen Johnson is exciting, and I would have honestly played Jalen Johnson because he's been playing so well that giving him some developmental time makes sense. But Nate is not in the business of that necessarily, and really, I've said this for a while, the Hawks have a very clear top 8 when they are healthy. And it's a credit to AJ Griffin that he's gotten into that top 8 as a rookie, but he is basically the 8th guy of the 8 in terms of current value. And the rest of those guys are entrenched. They're starters, plus the Kongwu, plus Bogdanovich, and then Griffin as the 8th guy. So Jalen is number 9 pretty clearly, and then you get into Aaron Holiday as number 10. But there's kind of a dividing line there, I think, from where the Hawks are approaching this one. If you want to kind of take a lot from this game, I wouldn't blame you on that. The Hawks did play very quickly in a good way in the first quarter, really the entire first half. They went up 12 late in the quarter. Honestly, it was 38-26 at the end of the first. They scored 38 points on 26 possessions in the first quarter, which is incredibly good. They took 12 free throw attempts, 8 assists in the first, only 2 turnovers. It was almost a perfect quarter, honestly, on offense. They were that good offensively before the end of the first. Defensively, they were rock solid. They also had 6 steals in the first quarter, which, if you're not familiar with that number necessarily, the Hawks only average 7 steals per game this year. So to have 6 in a quarter is certainly outstanding. In the second, Griffin came in to start that quarter. That's been a dedicated kind of rotational approach from the Hawks at this point in time. It seems like they want to get AJ on the court when Trae is not on in particular to kind of juice the offense. I do like that. Again, no Jalen in this game. It's also easier for the Hawks to play at the 4 with Hunter with Capela back because the Hunter Okongwu lineup is very, very, very small at the 4 and 5. Whereas if you go with Hunter, Capela can anchor your rebounding, a little bit more space around Capela as well. So I do like if you're going to play Hunter at the 4, which there are pros and cons to that, if you're going to do it, I think you need to do it with Capela. And that's what the Hawks, I think, will be doing more often moving forward. There was an 11-2 run by Atlanta early in the second quarter to go up by 18 points. At that point, the Hawks were shooting 70% from the floor with 12 assists in 15 minutes. They were really just flying with the ball in their hands. They led by as many as 26 points in the middle of the second quarter. Capela had a really good block in his second stint on the floor. Really an awesome half. Only up by 20. They were up by 26 before that, but still up by 20 at 70-50 at the end of the first half. It was one of the best halves of the season for the Hawks, objectively. Now, was it the best? I don't know how you want to sort of describe that, but they shot 8 of 12 from 3. That's obviously very helpful when you shoot almost 70% from the field as well. That's not sustainable, but still, the Hawks got some good shots. They made some good shots as well, but they were sort of good process-wise as well. 17 assists. They did have some ball security issues in this game, and that was kind of the case the entire way through, honestly. But the rest of the offense was good enough. And they had 4 guys with at least 12 points before halftime, including AJ, who had 12 off the bench in the first half of the game. So overall, that was where the Hawks won this one, as we'll get into later on. The Hawks were not great in the second half necessarily, but when you're up by 20, that really helps to boost your win probability for obvious reasons. And you can sort of afford to play a C- game after halftime when you played a plus game in the first half. It really was basically an A+ game from the Hawks in that first half. And we'll get into all of what transpired after that, as well as some takeaways from this game. And of course, our part 2 conversation about the Raptors game and more. But first, on this podcast, a word from our sponsors on the show. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. If you're looking for a DFS option this year, check out the award-winning app at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. I love it, and I know that you will too. It's so very easy to use. I can vouch for that. I've been playing on PrizePicks for quite some time now in the NBA and other sports, and I really enjoy the process. All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players and actually choose whether they have more or less than a certain number of points or rebounds or assists or other stats that are involved over at PrizePicks. And there, you can win up to 25 times the money on your entry. They have all kinds of sports across the board. They have the NBA and college basketball, NFL. They have MLB and NHL, PGA, soccer, esports, and much more. And a whole entry can be done in just a minute or less. It's that easy and it's that quick. Plus, against the projected numbers, it's that straight ahead. They also have safe and fast withdrawals of PrizePicks, and they're operating in more than 30 states plus Canada at this point. Download the PrizePicks app or go to PrizePicks.com to sign up and play DFS today. First-time users can have a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. Don't forget to use that promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Check it out now at PrizePicks. All right, we'll dive into the second half now, and it was not pretty, particularly in the third quarter. The Hawks did not play their best game really at all in the third. It was pretty shaky defensively in the opening moments of the third quarter. They gave up some penetration, some good looks from Miami. There were obviously their point of attack resistance was definitely worse in the third quarter, and that led to a 17-4 run by Miami to get within 8 after about 6 minutes of the third quarter. The Hawks didn't score a point also for about 5 full minutes, so it was definitely a two-way disaster in the beginning part of the third quarter. They missed 5 straight shots. They had 3 turnovers. The ball crucially stopped moving, because the big thing about the offense in the first half, beyond the shot making, was that the ball was moving around. They were really doing a good job swinging it, extra passes, intentional cuts, all that stuff. And with Miami playing their normal switching scheme in the second half, the Hawks started to settle more for the contested jump shots and a little bit less movement overall, some more stagnation. That definitely burned them. The bleeding kind of stopped a little bit when Capela came back in, which was good, along with Trey after his short rest. And they got back up by 12 by the middle of the court with a 3 by Bogdanovic. I think defensively, they stabilized a lot with Capela on the floor. He and Collins had a huge joint block in the final minute of the third quarter. Miami, by the way, only scored 10 points in the final 6 minutes of the third with Capela on the floor, which was huge and kind of allowing the Hawks to not give away the store at that point in time. And they were still up by 11 points at the end of the third quarter, despite a pretty rough third overall. Some turnover issues. Again, Trey had 9 turnovers in the first 3 quarters, which is a staggering number, even if you have super high usage like Trey does. But the Hawks were still shooting the ball extremely well through 3 quarters. 61% from the floor is tough to overcome for the opposition. But in the fourth, the Hawks were still in good shape. And by the middle of the quarter, they're up by 15 points. And part of that was because DeJounte Murray had a huge start to the fourth quarter. He hit 2 threes. They were actually the only points for the Hawks for about 4 minutes were 2 threes by DeJounte. They were big shots. He took a third that was kind of a heat check miss, but he had 9 points. Not of the first 11 points for the Hawks to start out the fourth quarter. There was a deep 3 by Trey to help them go up by 15 after a 7-0 run mid-quarter. Hunter finished it off. And honestly, they were seemingly in a big commanding position at that point at 15 with 7 minutes to go. I will say the process was not fantastic early in the fourth quarter. They made some shots because DeJounte made those two threes. Trey got kind of left by the defense on that one catch and shoot that he had. But I think generally speaking, the process was not great offensively. I think that kind of reared its head after that because the Hawks, after a timeout from the Heat, Miami scored the next 5 points. There was a bizarre play where Butler kind of strangely decided to settle for a 3 when he had Trey on him one-on-one in a switch. And then Trey got called for a 3-shot foul. He barely touched him. It was kind of just a bizarre play all the way around from all sides, honestly. And then the Hawks had a turnover by Trey with about 4:20 to go. He went down on the sidelines on a trap and was kind of visibly frustrated, was also holding his ankle in potential pain. Then got a tee for kind of getting into it with Tyler Hero, who was trying to take the ball away from him. At that point, he was kind of holding on the ground. A pretty weak technical foul call in the middle of like a pretty heated crunch time moment. That allowed Miami to get back within 9. And Capela came back in for the last 5 minutes or so. They also closed with Bogdanovic and Hunter for the most part. There's a little bit of Collins at the end because the Hawks could not get stops, which Collins helps with, especially in place of Bogdanovic. But there was a 12-2 overall push by Miami. So when the Hawks went up by 15, it was an onslaught by Miami go all the way down to 5 at one point, and it was actually 4 very briefly for the Heat. There was a terrible possession that honestly is one of those, like, you can't there's always variance in the NBA, let's just say. So the Hawks, with 2 minutes to go, had a stagnant lost possession, but then DeJounte Murray hits a 3 at the buzzer of the shot clock plus the foul. And after a review, it was ruled to be a good shot. He missed the free throw, but the Hawks still went up by 8. And honestly, if that doesn't go in or if it's after the buzzer, the Hawks might have lost this game. They were definitely drowning at that point in time. But that was a big shot. Miami did score a few times in a row after that. But the Hawks actually had 2 big missed free throws, one by Trey, one by DeJounte, in addition to that 4-point play. But the Hawks got down to 4. The lead did. The Hawks did a good job, though, moving the ball in the next possession. Really kind of an excellent possession, honestly, like extra passes, unselfish play, and then ends up with Capela with a wide open dunk off a pass by Trey. It did give up a bucket right after that to go back only up by 4 again. But after I timeout, Tyler Hero fouled Trey, 3 or 4 times. Finally got one called. He made both. And then the Hawks got a 5-second violation on defense, which kind of sealed the game, honestly, because they got the ball to Trey. He made both, and that was the end of that. So overall, it wasn't pretty. Let's just say that. In the second half of this game, the Hawks did not play well. They lost the second half by 12 points. And even then, that was with the help of some shot making that was probably going to overcome the process issues. And it was much more like it's been, honestly, which is not what you want from the offense down the stretch. But they had the cushion, and that ended up working out very well for them. In the game, though, the offense was really good. A 122 offensive rating in this game. And some more context, the Heat were number 2 in the league in defense in the last month coming in. They are top 8 for the season. They are very good. They're very well schooled. And of course, famously, the Hawks had trouble scoring on the Heat in the playoff series. And also earlier in this season, they scored 98 points against the Heat. So they've had all kinds of offensive issues against Miami for a while now. And to have a 122 offensive rating through that lens is very impressive, even with the second half swoon that the Hawks did. I will say, though, they got killed in the possession battle. I stress this all the time on the show. It's a good thing to take more shots than your opponent. And Miami took 13 more shots than the Hawks did in this game because Atlanta did nothing on the offensive glass. They had 2 offensive rebounds in the entire game. Plus, they also had 60 turnovers, which is way more than you would want for the Hawks, more than they average, et cetera. So to be able to win a game when you take that fewer shots than your opponent, that means you shot well, and the Hawks did shoot well in this game. 59% from the floor, 13 of 27 from 3. 18 and 22 at the free throw line, 27 assists. Those are all really good numbers. It's hard to lose, honestly, when you shoot as well as the Hawks did in this game. So that's part of the story of this one, especially in the first half, but they were able to do enough. And until the fourth quarter, I will say at least until the middle of the third quarter, the offense was at least pretty good. And for the full game, obviously, you can, if all you do is offer me a 122 offensive rating in the game, you got to say yes to that, and it was enough for the Hawks. Defensively, they had a 115 defensive rating in this game. That isn't like ridiculously good, and Miami did shoot the ball very well in the second half, 56% from the floor after halftime. The numbers in the second half only were pretty ugly for the Hawks, quite honestly. The Heat actually scored 60-plus points after halftime, but they did force 16 turnovers in the game. They won the shooting battle again decisively. And the one area where they got beat pretty badly was the glass, but it wasn't quite as glaring because defensively it wasn't a disaster. They just did nothing on the offensive glass, which is, if you're going to lose the glass, the way to do that is to not get killed on the offensive glass. It's more that you just don't get a lot of offensive rebounds in your own right. So again, overall, the Hawks played a good game for sure. They played very well in the aggregate. Second half in particular, if you want to isolate that, not as much. But the first half was, borderline perfect. It wasn't all the way perfect, but there's always stuff to improve on. But it was definitely an A plus kind of half, and they sort of were able to ride out the second half of this one. They get to 22 and 22 as a result, and they're now 12 and 9 at home this season. We'll have more on this game with regard to the individual player breakdowns to end the show. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's show. Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat right now and don't want all the fat and calories that go along with it, you need to try Built Bar today. We just finished the holidays, of course, in recent days, and I really know one of my goals this year is to eat a little bit healthier. If you're anything like me, you don't want to give up all the taste to eat healthy, and Built Bar is a perfect option to blend the two together. With Built Bar, you actually get healthy and tasty in one package. They're so delicious that you won't believe how good they are for you as well. They have 100% real chocolate. Yes, real chocolate on the outside, and they come in a ton of awesome flavors. That includes peanut butter brownie and coconut almond. They taste like a candy bar, honestly, with 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar plus 17 grams of protein. You don't have to wait around right now to get a box today. For a long time, I've been telling you to get all of your Built Bars at Built.com. It's still a fantastic option, but you can also get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club right now as well. That's right. Walk into the pharmacy section of a local Walmart and grab a box of Built Bars, including a 4-bar box of my personal favorite, cookies and cream. Or if you're closer to a Sam's, run and get a 13-bar box. Yes, a 13-bar box at Sam's Club. Make sure to check out Built Bar today. Across the board, Built.com, Walmart, Sam's, etc., and start your new right with Built Bar. All right, and only 8.5 guys saw the court in this game. The 9th guy, Aaron Holiday, played 5 minutes total and did not have anything in the box score other than a foul. Very typical Aaron Holiday. I think if you're trying to figure out why he played, I would have imagined it was probably to kind of just pester Tyler Hero a little bit in the first half. That's been a staple of Nate's this year, is that they go a little bit wider in the first half, a little bit narrow in the second half on the rotation. That happened in this game, but kind of an incomplete on Aaron Holiday in this game. Bogey did not shoot the ball well. He was actually 0 of 6 on 2s, which is a strange number for Bogey. 2 of 5 on 3s. He actually was plus 10, despite being 2 of 11 from the floor for only 8 points. Did have 5 assists, though, 2 steals, no turnovers. I don't think he played that badly. He just didn't shoot well at all. And we're at the point where if Bogey doesn't shoot well, it becomes kind of glaring. But there you go. Capela off the bench. 12 points, 6 rebounds, 3 blocks in 21 minutes. I thought he looked great, honestly. Of course, you never know about the calf till later. Maybe we'll get an indication about that before Wednesday's game. But the Hawks looked good when he played. I thought Capela, especially defensively, I thought Capela looked good physically. The 3 blocks, rebounded the ball well, efficient around the rim. Missed his free throw, but it was even like a roll. It was like a roll around miss. It wasn't like a total duck either. So good to have Clint back. I've said it for a long time. I thought Clint was probably their MVP, or at least close to it, in the first half of the season this year. He's been out for a while, but he is extremely important to them. And it's not because of Okongwu. I think Okongwu has been playing very well recently, honestly. but Capela just anchors them in a different way. And also it's about having all 48 minutes of quality center play. And now they have that again with Capela back. So a huge injection there. And we'll see if that can sort of carry through from here. AJ Griffin had a big first half, had 12 points. It was definitely colder with regard to being kind of more anonymous after halftime. But still 12 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, +9, 5-6 from the floor. He just didn't take a ton of shots. Wasn't quite as aggressive in the second half, but still looked really good in this game as he has for a while. AJ's doing his job and doing it well. To the starters. Okongwu was relatively quiet in this one. 8 points, 3 rebounds, did have a steal and a block, 2 turnovers, had 5 fouls. I thought he played okay. Just wasn't a huge impact game from Okongwu after a couple of pretty big ones in recent days. He had the one game where he had a career high in rebounds over the weekend, but I thought he played well in this one despite a pretty low usage, let's just say. Collins played solidly, 14 points on 9 shots, 4 rebounds, had an assist, had only 1 turnover, +9, just kind of did his job. There was some ball handling issues for sure. I couldn't understand why the Hawks were trying to get him touches against Jimmy Butler. Like if it's Collins against Gabe Vincent or Tyler Hero or Max Strus, sign me up. If it's Collins against Jimmy Butler one-on-one, you don't like that matchup at all. So as a big Collins guy, not even I want that to happen. So that was something I would try to excise in the future against Miami, but I thought Collins played well in the aggregate despite some of those creation issues one-on-one. Trey and DeJounte to round it up. First, DeAndre Hunter, 15 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. I thought Hunter was fine. Couple big moments in this one. Did a good job on Butler for the most part. That's kind of his one calling card in this matchup against Miami is to slow down Butler. Butler had 34 points, but a lot of that was just like Jimmy Butler doing Jimmy Butler stuff, getting in the line. I thought that he did a good job on him overall. And then the guards were a mixed bag. You know, I thought Trey, for all the 10 turnovers, that's kind of the headliner, is that 10 turnovers in a game is tough to overcome. You just can't be like perfect when you do that. He did have 4 steals. I thought, to be positive, I thought Trey defensively was very engaged. He was getting over screens. He was being pesky and digging down and using his hands. And it was really a strong defensive game for Trey, especially by his standards. Offensively, not as good. I thought he was great in the first quarter, maybe even first quarter and a half. And then he really ran into the wall with the ball security issues. Miami has flummoxed him in the past. He got past out a lot of that in this game. He said he had 24 and 8 assists. I thought he played okay. Just the ball security issues are hard to overcome with 10 turnovers. And then DeJounte played great again. I mean, the process issues, he's not always the best shot selection guy. That's become clear over 44 games, but he hit 5 out of 8 from 3 in this one. Took 8 threes. I actually like that versus the 18-footers that he usually takes. Was 6 of 9 on 2s, 7 assists, 2 steals, and a block, 2 turnovers. I thought he played very well, 28 points to lead all scorers for the Hawks, and a good game from DeJounte overall in this one. So from here, I will again remind you that we have a part 2 on this podcast talking about all the stuff from Hawks Raptors on Saturday, as well as all the organizational tumult and the transaction with Jarrett Culver leaving the organization over the weekend. But again, in the aggregate here, a good win for the Hawks, a good weekend for the Hawks, 3-0 in the last 4 days and up to 500 for the season. That's a very good place to be. Does that solve every issue? No. Is there a tough game on Wednesday? Yes, they have to go to Dallas. That's definitely a tough trip for any team at this point, but a winnable game there, national TV, and really a nice day at the office for Atlanta on this Monday, despite all the swirling winds off the court. The on-court product in the last week or so has been quite good, which is encouraging for the future. All right, that's it for today's podcast on this part 1. Again, part 2 should be in your feeds right now with everything else on the podcast. Please subscribe to the show across platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Google Play, and we're also on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me on Twitter at BT Rowland. Also follow my written work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. We'll see you all next time.